We are going to be talking about two of the first dystopian novels ever written. There is one previously called We that was written in 1921 that is on my list. I haven't read yet, but other than that, these two set the stage for tons of dystopian novels to come, and also a lot of how we think and feel about certain things in our society today. So they're very influential, and I was really excited to read them, and now I am excited to talk about them with you. So the novels we're talking about are Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and 1984 by George Orwell. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley was published in 1932, and it is set in a society where people are genetically engineered to be happy within their predetermined life, within their predetermined caste setting. And this world is based around pleasure. Everything is supposed to be enjoyable, and there's distractions galore. And if you're not participating in these mind-numbing distractions, then you are considered weird and something's wrong with you. If you feel any slight inconvenience, you can take the drug called soma to help take your mind away for a little while, go on a mental vacation, a soma holiday. And obviously all is not well in this utopia, and we get to see a lot of that through someone's eyes who has not grown up in that society. It was really cool. I read this super fast. I got sick, and then I was like, oh, I can finally read this book, and I flew through it. Also, by the way, I read both of these books with the Hardcore Literature Bookclub, and I'll link that in the description if you want to check it out. He has some really amazing lectures on there for all of these books, and that was why I even read these two books together, was because that was what we were reading, and it was really cool and really insightful. 1984 was published by George Orwell in 1949, and 1984 is set in the nation of Oceania, which is constantly at war and ruled by the government called the Party. And they control every aspect of life. You are constantly being surveilled, and anyone that strays from what the party deems correct disappears. They're gone. Any trace of them is gone. In fact, they never even existed. And even your thoughts can be considered crimes, and no one actually knows for sure what is a crime. They just have an idea of what is expected and what can get people in trouble. And Winston is the main character, and he feels very discontent about how things are, but he also feels like he's alone. He feels like he's the only one who thinks this way. And eventually he does meet someone else who feels similarly, but Big Brother is always watching. Something really interesting about these two books that I learned was that the authors were actually in communication with each other, and they kind of argued about whose dystopian society was more likely. Were we going to end up in this pleasure-oriented, mind-numbing society, or were we headed towards this totalitarian, constantly at war, boot on the face type society? And so that's a really interesting question to think about. I'll probably talk about it a little bit more a little later. Yeah, it's something to mull over. What type of society have we ended up in? Obviously, it's neither of these exactly, but are we more in one than the other? Are we heading into or out of more of one than the other? First, I'll just start with my overall reading experience. Brave New World was super fun for me. Like I said, I flew through it, partly because I was sick and I had nothing else to do. But I don't know, I just really had fun reading it. It was kind of comedic, even though it was this utopian dystopia, and there were a lot of heavy messages and stuff going on. It was still somewhat of a light read, whereas 1984 was a good bit heavier. And the characters were more unlikable, but in a very realistic way. I'll talk more about the characters in each book in a minute, but and there was definitely a stretch in 1984 that was very hard to get through. It's like you're reading a book within a book, and that was a little bit boring, I guess. Overall, it was just a heavier read, so it took a little longer to get through, but both were really enjoyable. But if you don't want to read something depressing, then, you know, maybe wait on 1984 because it's definitely not uplifting. So starting with Brave New World with the character, by the way, disclaimer, all of these opinions are my opinions, and I'm always interested in hearing someone else who's read these books. I'm always interested in hearing their opinions and what they thought, especially if they're different from mine. So anyway, with that said, I thought the characters in this book were kind of one-dimensional. They like felt a little bit flat, but that to me just made the focus more on the world. The world felt more like the main focus. The world and the society, and how the society developed has affected everything. How the society has affected everything. One of the main topics that comes up in here that I really thought was interesting was the absence of art, and how art, because of the way the world is, how art has not only fallen out of society, but is like, it's not necessary. People don't want to create it, and it is frowned upon to do anything that we would consider art these days. And so yeah, I just thought that the main focus of this book was more on the world and the society and its ramifications, rather than the characters' like deep emotional internal thoughts and feelings. And that's definitely still a part of it, but yeah, the characters just felt a little bit more one-dimensional in this one, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Now I'll talk about is it true? So are we living in this society? Obviously we're not living in this society, but what could be true, in my opinion, in our society from this book? And this society is a pleasure, distraction-based society, which honestly rings true. Like, we are very distraction-based. We have all of our social media. We never walk into another room without our phones. And we're always having these apps that we're scrolling through. Like, people talk, like doom scrolling became a term. People have phone addiction, social media addiction. We want to be distracted. We want to have those little dopamine hits of getting likes, and we're very uncomfortable with being bored, with silence. So that's definitely something that could be true for us today. And another thing I had was technology taking the place / need of creating art, of creativity. And then with this one, I'm thinking more of like generative AI type stuff. I think that humans have an innate desire to create. We are naturally creative, and it is important to us. And we see in this book how absence of art, absence of creativity has a lot of negative side effects when generative AI can just consume all of these artists' artwork and then can spew out thousands and millions and billions of copies of new art in that style, and then corporations can just use that instead of paying artists. I can definitely see how that could devolve into a society where artists are less valued and their work is not needed as much, and same thing with writers and a lot of other types of art. So unfortunately, I could definitely see that happening, but I don't think it will, because I do think that we want to create, we need to create. It helps us feel fulfilled. And also in our age of technology and social media, where artists are able to put themselves out there, and the people that need their art are able to find them easier than ever. And so I do think that there are positives to this, and I don't want to sound doom and gloom, because I don't think it is all doom and gloom, but there are definitely some things to be aware of. Another crossover could be media censorship. I mean, when has media censorship not been a thing? I don't think it's ever not been a thing. However, the specific crossover I'm thinking of is book banning. In this book, there's like, you know, people don't read Shakespeare, people don't read like all of these great books. They don't want them getting these ideas of like freedom and individual thought and things like that into their heads, so they don't allow them to read those books. I don't think that anything's that extreme here, but we do have and have always had some form of media censorship, book banning, that kind of stuff going on. Now on to 1984, talking about the characters. So I am both intrigued and repelled by every character in this book. Most of them, especially the main character, are multidimensional. They have layers to them, they have contradictions, and we stay with our main character the whole time, Winston. Not Brave New World flips point of view a few times, and I think we don't even end up back in the original point of view we were in. But anyway, both books have a world that's really important to the message and the story, but I think that we see that more through the main character's point of view in this book rather than seeing the world as a zoomed out thing from the beginning. We kind of get pieces of it through Winston's point of view and through his reactions to things as we go through the book. And the book really uses his inner struggle to guide us through the different aspects of the world. And we're just more deeply involved in Winston's psyche, in my opinion, than any of the characters in Brave New World. However, I really think it should be a trigger warning how depressing this book is. There is an appendix, the Newspeak appendix or something, and you could read that before or after or at any point reading this book. It is nice to read that and know that this society does not persist forever, and it seems like it actually doesn't persist for a very long time. And though that appendix just kind of gives a little bit of hope after reading this super depressing book. Now, is it true? Do we live in a society that's similar to this? Unfortunately, this is a totalitarian society that I think some countries are living in and have lived in something similar to this. And I can only speak from my point of view living in the United States. And luckily, we don't live in a society that is exactly like this. Not that there aren't crossovers and similarities, just like Brave New World, but I just want that disclaimer that I might talk about how we don't live in a society like this. At the same time, I'm aware that there are some really sad things going on in other countries. And it's good to know that George Orwell was kind of a part of the communist era, the communist movement in England. And this book speaks to communism as its pros and cons, where it was supposed to be good and then where it failed in execution, which is the big thing with communism, is like reading about it. Like a lot of the ideas sound very romantic, sound very good, like, oh yeah, I believe that, that sounds great. And then when someone actually tries to put it into action, it is really oppressive, and it's just a new order of totalitarian coming in and causing a lot of pain and suffering. Anyway, where does our society, as in me living in the US, cross over with aspects of this book? And one is definitely censorship again. And with this one, with 1984, I'm speaking more about controlling the media that people consume. So I'm thinking of like algorithms and news organizations and very like biased news and media and stuff being put out there. And not only biased, but like the algorithm thing is an interesting one to think about. It's like we only receive the media in our feed that is fed to us by the algorithm. And obviously if someone's controlling that, we're only getting what they want to see. But whether or not you believe that, I don't know. But also you're only receiving what it thinks you want to receive, at least. And so therefore you're no longer getting a very wide range of views. You're kind of just getting whatever you already believe, or the algorithm thinks you might believe, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's just not, you just don't look something up and get the same search page as on Instagram or YouTube or whatever as anybody else. You get a curated one for you, and therefore your view of the world stays very different from someone else's view of the world instead of broadening, because our algorithms keep us in our own little bubble. I don't know, maybe this is true, maybe it's not, but it's just something I've been thinking about, especially because of this book. Let me know your thoughts on that. There's another theme in this book, which is war. This country is constantly at war. While the US has been very privileged to not be at constant war like a lot of the countries in the Middle East, at least not be involved in it like close up, there have still been like these threats of it, like, oh, pretty soon they're gonna bomb us and blah, blah, blah. And like a lot of politicians using these threats and these like dire need of peace talk and stuff to promote their campaign to get votes. And not that, I don't know if these threats are true, if they're not, if it is dire to have this negotiations. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point that I'm mulling over is like the use of war and I guess fear of war to gain power, to have control. Because one of the things of this book is like, because the country's constantly at war, the people are required to rely on their government. Because there is no moment of peace, no moment of rest, they're not able to question the government as much because they need them. It like forces the people to not only rely on, but also root for their government. We're rooting for the armies and the military to keep us safe. So anyway, it's just something to think about. This is still kind of a new idea for me and just something I thought was interesting to mull over. Anyway, I hope those thoughts made sense. I just think that it's fun to talk about books after you've read them, especially books with a lot of really deep messages and themes like these two. I think it's really interesting that the two authors were kind of like arguing over whose dystopia was more likely, which one they were moving into. But with that, I'm really curious what you think. What do you think? Which society are we more in? Are we in more of a Huxleyan, pleasure-oriented society, or more of an Orwellian, boot on the face society, or a mixture of both? And what do you think are the crossovers? And are you going to read these books if you haven't already, or maybe reread them? I know some people might feel like it's a little overwhelming to read these kinds of books right now, and I totally get it. Don't read them if you don't feel like it, or if you only want to read one. My train is going off again. If you only want to read one because you don't want to be super depressed, then definitely go for Brave New World. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. Please give this video a like if you liked it. Ciao.